Looking at my dad across the crowded retirement party, watching him bask in 30 years of applause, I clutched the small wrapped box in my hands. The same hands he'd dismissed as not built for real work since I was 12. Tonight, after his speech about owing everything to his sons, I was going to give him a gift he'd never forget. A gift that would make him understand exactly what his biggest failure had been capable of all along. The Riverside Country Club buzzed with the energy of success. 300 guests filled the grand ballroom, their conversations mixing with the gentle clinking of champagne glasses and soft jazz piano. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over round tables draped in crisp white linens, each one decorated with centerpieces of white roses and baby's breath. The Martinez Construction Company banner hung proudly above the stage, featuring my father's company logo in bold navy and gold. Roberto Martinez stood at the head table, resplendent in his custom-tailored navy suit, silver hair perfectly styled, commanding the room like he'd commanded construction sites for decades. At 65, he still carried himself with the broad-shouldered confidence of a man who'd built an empire from nothing. His weathered hands, scarred from years of manual labor before he became strictly management, gestured animatedly as he shared stories with the mayor and several city council members. To his right sat my brother Michael, 38, wearing an expensive charcoal suit that complemented his role as vice president of operations. His wife Sarah, immaculate in emerald silk, laughed at something the bank president's wife whispered in her ear. Their twin boys, dressed in matching navy blazers, sat quietly coloring in activity books, already groomed to be the next generation of Martinez men. To Dad's left, my younger brother David, 35, sat with his girlfriend of 6 months, a blonde marketing executive who'd already started planning their future wedding aloud to anyone who'd listen. David, the company's director of business development, had inherited Dad's natural charm and ruthless negotiation skills. His broad smile and firm handshake had sealed more deals than anyone else in the company's history. And then there was me, Rebecca Martinez, 33, sitting at table 7 instead of the head table, wearing a simple black dress I'd bought specifically because it wouldn't draw attention. My long dark hair was pulled back in a conservative bun, my makeup minimal and professional. I'd learned years ago that standing out only invited criticism. Better to blend into the background, to be the invisible daughter who handled the details while the men took the credit. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was sitting with Dad's accountant, 3 subcontractors and their wives. These were the people who actually knew the inner workings of Martinez Construction, who'd seen the spreadsheets and invoices that told the real story of the company's success. They treated me with the respect and recognition that my own family had never bothered to show. "Rebecca," whispered Tom Henderson, the company's head accountant for 15 years, leaning closer so others couldn't hear. "Are you sure about this? Once you do this, there's no going back." I looked down at the small box in my lap, wrapped in elegant silver paper with a navy ribbon. Inside was a USB drive containing 3 years of meticulously gathered evidence, along with printed copies of the most damning documents. Financial records, email chains, contract negotiations, bank statements, everything that proved the truth about who had really saved Martinez Construction from bankruptcy, not once, but 3 separate times. "I'm sure," I whispered back, my voice steadier than I felt. "He's about to give a speech about how his sons built this empire. Every person in this room deserves to know the truth." The DJ's voice crackled through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Mr. Roberto Martinez would like to say a few words about his incredible journey." The room gradually quieted as guests found their chairs. Conversations died down to respectful murmurs, then silence. Dad stood slowly, savoring the moment, his chest puffed with pride as he surveyed his kingdom. This was his night, his celebration, his chance to cement his legacy in front of the most important people in our city. "My friends," Dad began, his voice carrying the slight accent that decades in America had never quite erased. 30 years ago, I came to this country with nothing but a toolbox and a dream." Applause rippled through the room. I watched him soak it in, remembering the countless times he'd told this story. How he'd started with a single pickup truck, taking any construction job he could find. how he'd slowly built a reputation for quality work and fair prices, how Martinez Construction had grown from a one-man operation to a company with 200 employees and projects across 3 states. What he never mentioned was how close he'd come to losing it all. 3 times. The first time was in 2008, when the housing market collapsed and half their contracts were canceled overnight. Dad had been ready to declare bankruptcy, but I'd been the one to restructure their debt, to negotiate payment plans with suppliers, to find the commercial contracts that kept them afloat. I was 24 then, fresh out of business school, working as Dad's assistant while my brothers finished their degrees. I want to thank my beautiful wife, Maria, who supported me through every late night and weekend job. Dad raised his champagne glass toward Mom, who smiled graciously from her seat beside him. She looked elegant in midnight blue, her silver hair swept into an updo that had taken 3 hours at the salon that afternoon. More applause. I remembered those late nights differently. I remembered Mom crying in the kitchen because the bills were overdue. I remembered her working double shifts at the hospital to keep food on the table while Dad poured every penny back into the business. I remembered being the one to balance the family checkbook because Dad was too proud to admit he needed help with the numbers. I want to thank my incredible team, Dad continued, gesturing toward tables filled with foremen, project managers, and office staff. The people who show up every day to build dreams for our community. He didn't mention that I'd been the one to design the employee benefits package that kept their best workers from jumping to competitors, or that I'd negotiated the health insurance contracts that saved the company $40,000 a year, or that I'd implemented the safety protocols that had kept them from facing the lawsuits that had destroyed 2 of their competitors. The second time I'd saved the company was in 2015, when their biggest client, Ocean View Developments, had tried to back out of a $12 million contract by claiming shoddy workmanship. Dad had been ready to settle for half the contract value just to avoid court. But I'd been the one to gather the evidence, to document every specification that had been met and exceeded, to present a case so airtight that Ocean View not only paid the full amount, but gave us 3 additional projects. But most of all, Dad said, his voice growing stronger, more emotional, I want to thank my sons. Michael and David, you are the future of this company. You have the vision, the drive, the natural leadership that will take Martinez Construction into the next generation. My heart started pounding. Here it came, the moment I'd been dreading and preparing for in equal measure. Michael, your operational brilliance has streamlined our processes and increased our efficiency by 30%. Dad's smile was radiant with paternal pride. David, your business development skills have opened doors I never dreamed possible. Together, you represent everything I hoped this company could become. The applause was thunderous now. I watched my brothers stand briefly to acknowledge the recognition, their faces glowing with satisfaction. Michael's wife beamed as if she'd personally contributed to his success. David's girlfriend clutched his arm possessively, already seeing herself as part of the Martinez dynasty. And I sat in the shadows, invisible as always, clutching a box that contained the power to shatter everything. The third time I'd saved the company was just 18 months ago, when a disgruntled former employee had filed complaints with the state labor board claiming safety violations and wage theft. The fines alone would have been $800,000, enough to cripple their cash flow for years. But I'd been the one to dig through 5 years of payroll records, to document every safety training session, to prove that the accusations were fabricated by someone seeking revenge for being fired for cause. I owe everything to my sons, Dad declared, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. They have what it takes to build something lasting, something meaningful. My daughter. He paused, and for a moment I thought he might actually acknowledge my contributions. My daughter never had what it takes. The words hit me like a physical blow. After everything I'd done, everything I'd sacrificed, all the times I'd worked until 3 a.m. to save his precious company, this was how he saw me. Not as the person who'd actually kept Martinez Construction alive, but as the disappointment who'd never measured up to his expectations. The room erupted in applause again, but I barely heard it over the roaring in my ears. 33 years of being dismissed, overlooked, and undervalued crystallized into this single moment of public humiliation. He hadn't just said it to my face in private. He'd announced it to 300 of the most important people in our community. I stood up slowly, my legs shaking, but my resolve absolute. The small wrapped box felt heavier now, weighted with the power to change everything. Tom Henderson grabbed my wrist gently, one last silent question in his eyes. I nodded once, decisively. Every step toward the stage felt like walking through water. Conversations quieted as I passed, people wondering why Roberto Martinez's daughter was moving through the room during his speech. My heels clicked against the hardwood floor, a steady rhythm that matched my heartbeat. Dad noticed me approaching and paused mid-sentence, confusion flickering across his face. He probably expected me to whisper something in his ear, to handle some detail that needed his attention. That's what I'd always done before. Stayed in the background, managed the problems, made sure everything ran smoothly while he took the credit. "Dad," I said clearly, my voice carrying through the wireless microphone he still held. The entire room was watching now, 300 pairs of eyes focused on what they assumed would be a touching family moment. I held out the silver-wrapped box, my hands steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. "I have something for you, from your biggest failure." I placed the box in his hands, looked directly into his shocked eyes, and turned to walk away. Behind me, I heard the whisper of paper being torn, the soft thud of a lid being lifted, and then silence. The kind of complete, suffocating silence that only comes when something fundamental has shifted in the universe. I was halfway to the exit when the screaming started. I didn't sleep that night, not 1 minute. I sat in my small apartment, still wearing the black dress from the party, staring at my laptop screen as the emails poured in. By 2 a.m., I had 47 messages from people who'd been at the retirement party. Business partners, city officials, even some of my father's closest friends. The tone was consistent: shock, admiration, and above all, questions about why they'd never known the truth. The USB drive I'd given Dad contained everything. Every late-night email I'd sent to salvage deals when clients threatened to walk away. Every financial restructuring plan I'd created during the company's 3 near-bankruptcy events. Every safety protocol I'd written after researching industry best practices for 6 months. Every contract negotiation where I'd been the invisible hand, ensuring Martinez Construction came out ahead. But more than that, it contained the communications that proved my father knew exactly what I'd been doing all along. The smoking gun was an email chain from 2015, when Ocean View Developments had tried to void their $12 million contract. Dad had forwarded my entire legal strategy to the company attorney with a note: "Rebecca has prepared a comprehensive response. Follow her recommendations exactly." When they won the case, keeping the full contract value, Dad had taken sole credit in every interview and company newsletter. Another damning piece of evidence was a recorded phone call from 2019, when the State Labor Board investigation threatened to shut them down. I'd had Dad's permission to record client calls for quality assurance, but I'd also been recording our strategy sessions. On the recording, Dad's voice was crystal clear. "Thank God Rebecca documented everything. Without her organizational skills, we'd be finished. Make sure the lawyers know she's the point person on this." 2 days after the party, Dad's company lawyer called him directly, refusing to represent him in what he assumed would be a wrongful termination lawsuit from me. "Roberto," the lawyer had said, according to Tom Henderson, who'd been present, "you can't publicly humiliate someone who has this much documentation. She could sue you into the ground and win." But I didn't want to sue him. What I wanted was something far more valuable: recognition from the people who actually mattered in this industry. By Thursday morning, 3 major construction firms had called me directly. Word had spread through the tight-knit community of contractors, architects, and developers. Everyone knew that Martinez Construction's success had a secret architect, and now they knew who she was. "Rebecca Martinez?" The voice on my phone belonged to James Sullivan, CEO of Sullivan & Associates, the largest commercial development company in the state. I'm calling because Tom Henderson gave me your number. After what happened at your father's party, I think we need to talk. I gripped the phone tighter. Sullivan and Associates was the kind of company that Martinez Construction had always dreamed of partnering with but never quite reached. Their projects were massive. Shopping centers, office complexes, entire residential developments. Working with them would have elevated Dad's company to a completely different level. Mr. Sullivan, I appreciate the call, but I should mention that I'm not currently in a position to speak for Martinez Construction. He laughed, a warm sound that surprised me. Rebecca, I'm not calling about your father's company. I'm calling about you. We've been looking for someone with your exact skill set for months. After seeing the documentation you compiled, Tom showed me some of the financial restructuring work you did in 2008. I'd like to offer you a position as Director of Strategic Operations. My hand started shaking. I'm sorry, what? The salary is $140,000 plus performance bonuses that could add another $50,000, full benefits, company car, and equity participation after your first year. When can you come in for a formal interview? I had been making $38,000 a year as my father's assistant, with no benefits beyond basic health insurance and 2 weeks of vacation that I'd never been able to take because the company needed me. After I hung up with Sullivan, I sat in stunned silence for 20 minutes before my phone rang again. This time, it was Patricia Hernandez, the Chief Operating Officer of Coastal Properties, another major player in commercial real estate development. Rebecca, I was at your father's retirement party on Monday night. What you did took incredible courage, and frankly, it's exactly the kind of strategic thinking we need on our team. Are you available for lunch tomorrow? By Friday afternoon, I had 5 job offers. Not interviews, actual offers, with salary ranges that were 3 to 4 times what I'd been making. Companies that had watched Martinez Construction's success from the outside now understood that the real strategic mind behind that success was available. But the most meaningful call came from someone I hadn't expected. David's girlfriend, Ashley. Rebecca, it's Ashley Morrison. I guess I should say David's ex-girlfriend now. Her voice was shaky but determined. I wanted to call because what happened at the party? It opened my eyes to some things. I had never particularly liked Ashley. She'd always seemed like the type of woman who was more interested in the Martinez name than in David himself. But something in her voice was different now. I've been with David for 8 months, she continued, and in all that time, he's never mentioned anything you've done for the company. But after Monday night, I started asking questions. Did you know that he's been telling people he designed the employee benefits package and that client retention strategy that everyone praised him for? He told me he developed that himself. My chest tightened. The client retention strategy had taken me 6 months to research and implement, including a detailed analysis of competitor practices and customer satisfaction surveys I'd conducted personally. Ashley, you don't need to— Yes, I do, she interrupted. Because I work in marketing, Rebecca. I know intellectual property theft when I see it, and what David and Michael have been doing to you is exactly that. They've been stealing your work and passing it off as their own for years. After she hung up, I walked to my window and looked out at the city skyline. Somewhere out there, Dad was probably in his office trying to figure out how to explain to his remaining clients why his biggest failure had been the real brains behind his operation. The weekend brought a parade of phone calls from extended family members, most of whom had attended the party. My Aunt Carmen called to apologize for years of dismissive comments about my career choices. My cousin Luis, who owned a small landscaping business, called to ask if I'd help him develop a growth strategy. Even my grandmother, who rarely spoke English on the phone, left a halting voicemail in her accented words. Mija, I always knew you were the smart one. Your grandfather would be so proud. But the call that surprised me most came Sunday evening from Michael. Rebecca. His voice was tight, controlled. We need to talk. Do we? I asked, settling into my couch with a cup of tea. Because last I checked, I was just the daughter who never had what it takes. Look, what Dad said was wrong, but what you did, that was a nuclear option, Rebecca. You've destroyed everything we've built as a family. I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. What we built? Michael, I built it. You just put your name on it. That's not fair. I've worked my ass off for this company. Have you? Because according to the emails I have, you spend most of your time on the golf course while I handle the actual operational challenges. Remember the Henderson project last year? The one where you told Dad you personally resolved the permit issues? Silence. I have the email chain, Michael. You forwarded the problem to me on a Tuesday and didn't respond to any messages until Friday, when I'd already solved everything. Then you called Dad to take credit. Rebecca, please. The company is falling apart. 3 clients have canceled contracts since Monday. The Riverside project is on hold because the city council is asking questions about our competency. You have to come back and fix this. I have to fix this? The audacity was breathtaking. Michael, I don't have to do anything anymore. For the first time in my adult life, I'm free to make choices based on what I want, not what the Martinez family needs. What about loyalty? What about family? What about respect? I shot back. What about recognition? What about 33 years of being treated like hired help in my own family's business? Monday morning, I drove to Sullivan & Associates for my interview. The building was everything Martinez Construction's cramped offices weren't. Modern, spacious, with floor-to-ceiling windows that filled the space with natural light. The reception area featured a wall of awards and photos from completed projects, each one representing the kind of large-scale development work I'd only dreamed of being involved in. James Sullivan turned out to be a man in his early 50s, with graying temples and the kind of quiet confidence that comes from years of successful deal-making. His corner office overlooked the harbor, with architectural models of current projects displayed on custom-built shelves. Rebecca, thank you for coming in. I have to say, the response to your availability has been remarkable. I've had calls from 4 other firms asking if we've made you an offer yet. Mr. Sullivan, I need to be completely transparent with you. What happened at my father's retirement party? It's going to follow me. There will be people who see what I did as disloyal or vindictive. He leaned back in his chair, studying me carefully. Rebecca, I've been in this business for 28 years. I've seen every kind of family drama imaginable in family-owned companies. What I saw Monday night wasn't disloyalty. It was someone finally standing up for themselves after years of being systematically undervalued. He pulled out a tablet and showed me a spreadsheet. This is Martinez Construction's project history for the past 10 years. Tom Henderson helped me match the timeline to your documented contributions. Do you want to know what we found? I nodded, though my stomach was churning. Every major success your father's company achieved corresponded to a period when you were heavily involved in strategic planning. Every time you were sidelined or excluded, their performance declined. The correlation is so strong it's almost mathematical. He swiped to another screen. More importantly, we looked at the companies you've been quietly helping on the side. Your cousin's landscaping business has grown 400% since you started advising him. The Martinez family's personal investments have outperformed the market by 12% annually, and according to Tom, you manage that portfolio entirely. I hadn't known Tom was paying such close attention to my side projects. What I'm offering you, Rebecca, isn't charity. It's not sympathy for a difficult family situation. It's recognition that you're one of the most naturally gifted strategic minds in this industry, and I want that talent working for my company before someone else snaps you up. That evening, I called Tom Henderson. Tom, I need to know what's really happening at Martinez Construction, not the sanitized version Michael tried to give me. Tom sighed heavily. Rebecca, it's bad. Really bad. Your father hasn't left his office in 3 days. He's not returning phone calls, not responding to emails. Michael is trying to hold things together, but he doesn't understand the client relationships well enough to manage the damage. What about David? David's been drunk since Tuesday. Ashley broke up with him after she realized how much of his success he'd stolen from you. He's convinced the whole family is falling apart because of what you did. Good, I said and meant it. But here's the thing, Rebecca. The company isn't just failing because of the public relations disaster. It's failing because you were the only one who really understood how all the pieces fit together. Without you doing the behind-the-scenes work, they're discovering that they don't actually know how to run the business. That's not my problem anymore, Tom. I know, and honestly, I respect the hell out of you for walking away, but I wanted you to know that your father's been asking about you." "What's he been asking?" "Whether there's any way to fix this, whether you'd consider coming back if he made you a partner, whether he could convince you to at least consult on the Riverside project so they don't lose it entirely." I closed my eyes, feeling a familiar tug of responsibility. For 33 years, that tug had controlled my life, making me feel guilty every time I prioritized my own needs over the family's problems. "Tom, tell my father that his biggest failure has better options now." On Tuesday, I accepted James Sullivan's offer. The signing bonus alone was more than I'd made in the previous 2 years combined. My new office had a view of the harbor and my own assistant. My business cards read, "Rebecca Martinez, Director of Strategic Operations," and seeing my name in embossed letters felt like a vindication 33 years in the making. The first project they assigned me was a $40 million mixed-use development that included residential condos, retail space, and a boutique hotel. It was exactly the kind of complex, multi-phase project that I'd always dreamed of managing but had never been given the chance to touch at Martinez Construction. Within a week, I'd identified cost savings of $800,000 and timeline improvements that would complete the project 6 weeks ahead of schedule. James Sullivan called me into his office Friday afternoon with a huge grin on his face. "Rebecca, in 1 week, you've justified your entire first-year salary. The client is thrilled with your recommendations, and the project team is convinced you walk on water." "It feels good to actually use my education for something more challenging than alphabetizing invoices," I replied. But the real satisfaction came the following Monday, when I was invited to present the development strategy to Sullivan & Associates Board of Directors. Sitting at the head of a conference table, explaining my vision to 12 successful business leaders who hung on every word, I finally understood what professional respect felt like. That same day, Martinez Construction lost the Riverside project. According to Tom, the city council had decided they weren't confident in the company's ability to deliver on time and on budget without Rebecca's involvement. The project, worth $18 million, went to Sullivan & Associates instead. James asked me if I wanted to work on it, knowing it would mean competing directly against my family's company. I said yes without hesitation. 3 weeks later, Dad called me directly for the first time since the retirement party. "Rebecca." His voice sounded older, worn down in a way I'd never heard before. I think I made some mistakes." "Some mistakes?" I was sitting in my new office looking out at a harbor view that cost more than Dad's entire annual salary. "Dad, you didn't make mistakes. You made choices. For 33 years, you chose to see me as less capable, less valuable, and less worthy of respect than my brothers. Your brothers are struggling, Mija. The company is... We're in trouble." "I know. I heard you lost the Riverside project." Silence stretched between us before he spoke again. "Tom tells me you're working on it now. For Sullivan." "That's right. Rebecca, please, can we meet somewhere? Can we talk about fixing this?" I looked around my new office, at the architectural plans spread across my desk, at the photo on my bookshelf from last week's groundbreaking ceremony where I'd been introduced as the project's lead strategist. 6 months ago, I would have dropped everything to rush to Dad's rescue. I would have felt guilty for his pain and responsible for solving his problems. Now, I felt something different, something that took me a moment to identify. Peace. "Dad, for 33 years, you had the opportunity to fix this. Every day, you could have chosen to value my contributions, to respect my intelligence, to treat me as an equal partner in the family business. Every day, you chose not to. I know I wasn't perfect. You weren't imperfect, Dad. You were deliberately cruel. You systematically undermined my confidence while stealing my work. You let Michael and David take credit for my achievements while telling everyone I didn't have what it takes. That wasn't an accident or a mistake. That was a pattern of behavior that lasted my entire adult life." "But you're my daughter." "No," I interrupted, my voice steady and calm. "I was your employee. I was your solution to problems you couldn't solve yourself. I was your secret weapon that you were too ashamed to acknowledge publicly. But I was never really your daughter because daughters deserve love and respect and recognition. What I got was exploitation." When I hung up the phone, I felt lighter than I had in years. For the first time in my adult life, I had chosen myself over the Martinez family's needs. I had walked away from the guilt and responsibility that had defined my existence for 3 decades. 6 months later, Sullivan and Associates promoted me to Vice President of Strategic Development. The Riverside project had come in $2 million under budget and 8 weeks ahead of schedule. 3 other major clients had specifically requested that I lead their projects. I was making more money than Michael and David combined, working on projects that challenged and excited me, surrounded by colleagues who respected my expertise. Martinez Construction filed for bankruptcy protection that same month. The company that Dad had spent 30 years building was being sold to pay off creditors, the family name erased from an industry where it had once commanded respect. I felt sorry for the employees who lost their jobs. I felt bad for Mom, who didn't deserve the financial stress of Dad's failures. But I didn't feel guilty. For the first time in my life, someone else's poor decisions were not my responsibility to fix. On the day the bankruptcy was finalized, Ashley Morrison called me one last time. "Rebecca, I wanted you to know that David has been in therapy since we broke up. He's starting to understand how much damage the family dynamic did to all of you." "I'm glad he's getting help," I said, and meant it. "He wanted me to ask you something. He wants to know if you'd be willing to have coffee with him sometime. Not to ask for help or money or anything like that. Just to apologize, I guess. To acknowledge what really happened." I thought about it for a long moment. Tell David that I appreciate the gesture, but some apologies come too late to matter. I've spent the last 6 months learning who I am when I'm not constantly fixing other people's mistakes. I like who I'm becoming, and I'm not ready to risk that progress by reopening old wounds. "I understand. For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. Walking away takes more courage than staying and enabling them." That night, I stood on the balcony of my new downtown condo, looking out at a city where I was finally building something that belonged entirely to me. My phone buzzed with congratulations from colleagues who'd heard about my latest promotion. My calendar was full of meetings with clients who valued my expertise. My bank account reflected, for the first time in my life, the true worth of my contributions. In the distance, I could see the construction cranes working on the Riverside project, the development that would have saved Martinez Construction if Dad had been willing to acknowledge who'd really been keeping his company afloat all those years. But he hadn't been willing. He'd chosen his pride over my potential, his outdated beliefs over my proven abilities, his need to see me as a failure over the reality of my success. And in the end, that choice had cost him everything while setting me free to become the person I was always meant to be. I raised my glass of wine to the city lights and whispered, "Thank you, Dad. Thank you for finally showing me exactly who you really are. And thank you for forcing me to discover exactly who I really am. The biggest failure in the Martinez family hadn't been me after all. It had been a father too blind to see the daughter who could have made him proud."